Hello everyone, this is Kiba. In 1782, French-American writer Hector St. John Crevecoeur wrote, "He is an American who, leaving behind him all his ancient prejudices and manners, receives new ones from the new mode of life he has embraced, the new government he obeys, and the new rank he holds. Since then, the definition of what it means to be an American has changed. However, as an Indian American, I find that Crevecoeur's words reflect how many second-generation Indian Americans assimilate into the society they grow up in. Being born and raised in America, I've often felt a disconnect between my two cultures. I'm American to Indians, but I'm always considered Indian within America. In many ways, our physical appearance and ethical values become a marker for our ethnic heritage. Recently, I've wondered what it was like for people like my parents to immigrate to the United States as an Indian. Do they face a similar identity crisis after settling down in the US? Over the week, I sat down with 5 Indian aunties, including my mom, and asked them how their sense of identity has evolved since they moved to America. So let's find out what they had to say.
What part of India were you born in? I was born in Kerala in southern India.
I'm from North.
I'm from northern part of India.
I am from Goa, India.
I come from the southern part of India, a state called Kerala.
How long has it been since you moved to the West?
I immigrated to Canada with my family 33 years ago, and then 14 years ago, I moved to America.
26 years.
And I moved to America in June of 1999.
It's been 21 years.
It's 29 years this year, yeah. But we didn't come straight from India. We came from South America, from Venezuela, because we lived there 15 years before we came here.
What brought you to America and why did you move?
So my husband was here working. So after wedding, I just moved here with him.
Tom got a job and I followed with Soumya when she was 2 years old.
My family immigrated, as I said.
It's my husband's work, and then also we didn't want to separate from the family. Our daughters had to come here for the college education.
As a physician, I thought I could enhance my career prospects over here, and because I like the way medicine is practiced outside of India. We get a very good medical education in India, but the practice of medicine sometimes isn't as it should be. So that was one thing, and then I got married and I came here.
What were some of the challenges you faced as an immigrant?
Initially, I think coming from a different country, to make friends was really difficult, and I guess anywhere you go new, I mean, you are like, you want to be a part of something, and it is challenging to get friends in the first time.
So I didn't feel too many challenges, but in the late 80s and in the early 90s, I did feel some racism in public places while living in Canada.
Do you want to elaborate on any of those experiences?
Just, there weren't that many Indians back then in Canada, and we used to be called, racial slurs.
So at that time, the H1 visa program under which Tom came, the spouses had H4 and you couldn't work. And I had always worked in India, and it was just awful to be a stay-at-home mom when there was really no one, no family. I had to make friends from scratch. So all of that was a huge challenge. I missed the ability to go and meet some bright people at work. I just had to stay home. I had to adjust to a life of cooking and cleaning and staying home with the baby. It was quite a challenge.
I think the biggest challenge is the distance from India. Like, it's really huge distance away from your family and people that you've known all your lives, and it's a very long flight and expensive, and to go back was not easy. And at the time when we came, it was about 22 years ago, the communication, and we didn't have your instant messaging. That was one of the biggest challenges. And of course, losing the comforts of home and having to set up a new a completely new community and family over here. That was some of the biggest challenges.
We didn't know anyone, so I felt lonely, and I couldn't work. So it was like it took me a long time to get the paperwork done, and then so I missed the family and the environment in India.
So, have you ever gone back to India?
Yes, we used to try to go to India every year, or at least 2 years.
A lot. I used to go back a lot before the pandemic.
Of course, yes, so many times.
I rarely go to India.
When you go back, do you feel that same connection you once did when you were younger, or is it a bit different?
It's a little different feeling because, of course, the families are there, so that's very valuable. In fact, that's the reason we go back to India for to visit the family. But then you don't have the same friends; they are all moved away, so it's a little different, you know. But you feel the nostalgic feeling when you go back, you know, about the country.
I mean, when I'm there, I really like it and enjoy it because I'm born there. So the environment, like the language, hearing the same language. But it's different. When we moved here, India was different. Like it was still traditional. And then within 5 years after we moved here, there was like a big transition, like the high rise and multinational companies and all the fast paced life. So when I go there now, I feel like spaced out.
I think India's changed a lot, and we live in a time warp. Like, I grew up in a very conservative family in southern India. I don't think people are that conservative anymore. At least my family has moved on. So it's become a lot more westernized. Whereas I think those of us who moved west retained a lot of like how we think Indians should live, what are their lifestyle or cultural values. And India, my family in India, I think many of them have no clue what I'm talking about. So some of the Indian activities that we do here, like Carnatic music, that's really not accessible even in a place like Bombay, easily accessible in a place like Mumbai, where you may have a lot of South Indians, but people are doing different things. And the things that we cling on to is we cling on to the India we know. And I think, in fact, the India that was there, at least when I went in 2019, is completely different.
How have you stayed in touch with your Indian roots, and what are some activities or things that you do? What are some things you participate in to keep in touch with your Indian identity?
So now that the world is so interconnected, that I do not feel I have to proactively, do anything to stay connected with my roots. But pre-COVID, we used to, hang out with our Indian friends, attend Indian cultural events, go to temple, and celebrate Indian festivals, wear Indian clothes. Hopefully, post-COVID, we'll be able to do all these things again soon, and then to stay, connected, to keep my family connected with the Indian roots. Also, I enrolled my daughters in Hindi classes and Indian classical dances.
So we are always connected with the friends, and we celebrate festivals. We cook the Indian meals and go to Indian restaurants. And I took my kids to Sunday school, so that's how we are like part of the community, going to temples.
Although, like, Tom and I have different religions. Tom was raised Christian and he practices Christianity, and I'm Hindu. I've stayed in touch with my roots by being part of the temple, by doing all the Indian holidays, by meeting families who celebrate the holidays like yours. And then also I do a Sanskrit class every Saturday, and Uma does Carnatic music. So all of that, I think, helps us stay in touch with our Indian roots.
We go for like musical, this Indian Music Association, they have some performances and all. So we do that. And these days with the social media, I mean, you can connect YouTube and everything. So we keep watching programs. We call people, we talk all the time. So I don't think we feel that way, disconnected.
So we are fortunate to be living in New Jersey, I think, because we do have a large Indian community and even a large Goan community, which is surprising because Goa is a small place, but you do have a lot of Goans in New Jersey and a very large Indian community. My children's friends are a lot of Indian girls who also try to keep in touch with their culture. And I think through that and participating in the Indian festivals and Goan festivals that we have has kept us very much in touch with our roots.
If the US and India were against each other in the Olympics, who would you root for?
That's a tough question.
That's hard.
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. I guess I would root for the best team. Doesn't matter whether it's America or India.
Maybe I would say US out openly, but in my heart, I would be rooting for India.
Actually, so now I do consider my loyalty to the US of A. So I think my loyalty would be to them. Maybe in my heart I would root for India.
If I'm in US, I would root for US. And if I'm in India, I would root for India.
Depends, I think. I would root for both.
What do you feel best describes your national identity?
I would say both. I'm Indian at heart, always will be Indian, but I love America as well.
I identify myself as a first generation Indian immigrant, and many of my values are Indian, but I think there are so many good things about America. So I identify myself definitely as American in terms of we have dialogues about tolerance, about diversity and acceptance, which I think still haven't really been sparked in the India we know. Unfortunately, I think there's still a lot of division in the society, and it's considered okay to be divisive. Whereas in the US, people would challenge you and ask you to look at what's fair and just. I'm not saying it's a fair and just society, but at least that dialogue is open. And I really appreciate that about the US. You meet a lot of diverse people. I think for a family like Tom and I to be able to keep our own different identities and to raise a family here, that's very uniquely American.
I would say more American, but with Indian roots.
I feel being come here for so long, living here and being part of the society. I mean, I can connect with both. I mean, I don't feel I'm only Indian, no, but I'm not American. I feel both ways, actually, I have a love for both places, Yeah.
So, like I said, I think since I chose to be adopting the US as my country, I would have to say that somehow I would like to be assimilated into the potpourri, which is America.
Right.
But at heart, yes, I would feel an Indian, but again, I consider myself as the huge, the mix of what America is all about: freedom, equality.
There's a book I'm reading in class called American as Paneer Pie. It's a children's book, and it's about a girl named Lekha who tries to survive the prejudice and discrimination she faces in her town. She's afraid to talk about her culture, and she often gets picked on by her fellow classmates. And overall, how I interpret the title American as Paneer Pie is that you cannot fully be Indian, nor can you fully be American. So considering that, do you think this analogy mirrors how you feel in America, or is it somewhat different?
I think that's true, because no matter how much we say you're American, there is always some part that where you feel unacceptance. So you're not completely part of it, even though you're you are fully part of it from inside, but maybe not when you come to the people. And we are kind of spaced out from India too, because there is kind of a disconnection. We feel like left behind, and people have moved forward.
No, I don't feel that way, because when I moved to North America, I was a grown teenager, and I was identified as Indian because I was born in India, which I don't mind. But I can understand why when kids here are referred to as Indians who are born in America, I can relate to that. And they should be considered Americans, because if they're born here, they are Americans.
That's a very good question, because I think I had a very solid identity growing up, because I never had to deal with what you people deal with. We grew up with everyone who was brown. Yes, there are shades of brown, and people are racist in India as well, but we had very strong sense of family and identity, and we were never battling, or we were never in a position that we felt we were different from other people. In fact, we felt we were kind of superior to other people. Here, you have a completely different situation where you are not only battling culture; it's a lot that the younger generation deals with. So you have a lot more challenges than we did growing up in high school. We were already pretty much set in our careers when we came here. We already had a strong sense of identity built into us, and nobody could crush it. You have to develop it. So I think maybe you guys are fortunate that you're in New Jersey. Maybe if we went to where this girl is from and has a lot of not that many similar people around her, and she has to explain her culture to everybody. See, I think especially in Cherry Hill or in southern New Jersey, a lot of people don't even question Indians. They know, because they themselves are second gen. They've lived with Indians, they've grown up. That is my experience, and I'm sure other people may not have had a similar experience.
Actually, in our case, probably it is different because we can speak the language, because we migrated much later stage. We were born and brought up there, so we can easily mingle with any of the culture. And here I don't feel, I see being part of it, we are living here, being here, breathing the air. I think we definitely have to assimilate with the culture and the people, try to be the best, So you cannot alienate one nor the other, I think, you can easily do that.
I think there's definitely discrimination, not just in school. And that sounds like a really interesting book. I have to lay my hands on it and start reading it, maybe tonight. So I think there is definitely discrimination in spite of all the progress, right? I think Indians, in fact, brown people, have benefited a lot from the battles of Black people. However, we identify ourselves culturally as separate. We tend to self-isolate, I think, and that sort of also aggravates the situation. I also think this in schools, consciously or subconsciously, there are microaggressions. That even the most accepting children of different races will look at you and say, "Hey, you're Indian. Your name is so Indian." And the same thing happens at work too. There are lots of microaggressions at work and whatever. But what I have, I think initially, yes, I used to be sort of taken aback by it. I didn't know how to deal with it. I think even up to a few years ago, we didn't have the vocabulary to deal with it. We didn't realize that maybe it's white privilege or cultural privilege, and the native borns have, versus the way they treat immigrants, the microaggressions especially. I love those words, and now I feel comfortable calling out colleagues in a very polite fashion for that. Right now, as you know, there's a lot of problems that Asian Americans face, the hatred that has been stirred by all this political dialogue about the virus coming from China. So I think I found empathy with other immigrants. I also do think learning to navigate different cultures, which took me about 15, 20 years, helps. And it's okay to call out people if they're treating you poorly. But if you don't have a vocabulary for it, if you don't understand what it is, if you're unable to label it, then there's a lot of heartache and a lot of trauma, I think, childhood trauma that people had to face.
Right. Thank you. That was all for the interview. So.
Okay.
That's amazing, isn't it? While there are some similarities that we heard in the interviews, each person has their own story to tell and their own experiences immigrating to the US. From what we heard, I would argue that we can't necessarily classify someone as just Indian or just American. This binary isn't good enough to fully understand the diversity of the Indian American population. Rather, what we have done is created a subculture on the foundation of these two cultures, hence the Indian American identity. What's different between the immigrants and the second-generation Indian Americans, though, is that second-generation Indian Americans had this identity crisis as a part of their childhood development process, whereas immigrants have already grown and developed their worldview. So to sum it up, the society we grow up in informs our worldview. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Special shout out to all the aunties and my mom who helped make this video possible. See you guys!